Back in Power BI, and in today's video we are going to show you the Power Query ribbon for 2024. We're going to take a look at how to find the Power Query ribbon, some of the basics of the Power Query ribbon, including the Home section, the Transform section, and the Add Column section. You can follow along by downloading the AdventureWorks file 2020. The reason why I recommend that is because there are some error functions and some different settings functions in this file that we can take a look at that you may encounter when you're using Power Query. So once you've downloaded the file, the link is in the description below. You will have the AdventureWorks 2020 file, and you will be in the report view. That is the overview where you see all of this. This is your top view. It's called the report view. And to get to the Power Query ribbon, you're going to want to go up to your main desktop ribbon, and you will see this function called Transform Data. And that will bring up the Power Query Editor, which allows you to connect, prepare, and transform data. So you will select the Transform Data function, and you'll get some different options. You'll get the Transform Data, the data source settings, and you can also edit your parameters. We want to transform the data. That will bring up the Power Query Editor ribbon. So the first thing you notice, we're going to start off with the Power Query Editor, and on the Power Query ribbon, starting from the left hand side, you have Close and Apply. You have your source functions, which include new sources and recent sources, and then you can also enter data manually in the Enter Data section. So that is the main Power Query ribbon. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at the Left Queries pane. Now the Left Queries pane is on this left-hand side, and this is where all of your different queries will show up. So we currently have some built-in queries in this model. They include the date, the product, the reseller, the sales order. And if you select one of the Left Query ribbons pane, we're going to select the date table. When you select that, on the right-hand side, you'll notice the right-hand queries pane. That has the name of the query, then it has all of the different applied steps. And those applied steps are the Power Query step transformations that you make in your data. So originally we had the source step, then we renamed the columns, then we added the month, added the full date, and then we removed other columns and we changed the type. So every time you do something on the Power Query steps, that gets added to the query. Now you'll notice in the middle, once it refreshed, this go to error message came up. And if you were to select this, the reason why this is coming up is because this is part of a SQL query, and once you download the file, you're not connected to that SQL query. So if you select the go to error button, this will bring up how you could fix that error with the Power Query. And what you would do is you would revalidate your query credentials if we had those for the data source, the SQL query, but we do not have those. And we do not need those to get inside the Power Query ribbon. We're going to take a look at some of the different functions you can do. So far we've taken a look at the Left Queries pane and the Right Queries pane in the Power Query Editor. So far, we've taken a look at the left pane on the Power Query Editor. We've also taken a look at the right pane. Now we're going to go to the main ribbon, and the main Power Query ribbon is at the top. And you'll notice there's three main functions of the Power Query ribbon. You have the home function, you have the transform, and then you have the add column. So those are the three main functions. Then additional tools include the view, the tools, and the help features on the Power Query ribbon. So when you are in the home section, that is where you can add your new sources of Power Query data. You can take a look at your recent sources. One of the things that you'll use in the Power Query ribbon quite a bit is the data source settings. If you select the data source settings, this is what will show for the current data sources in this file. Now, if you're following along on the AdventureWorks file, which is in the description below the link, this only has one source. It has the AdventureWorks database 2020. If you had additional sources like Excel, or if you had some data connected to the internet or Google Analytics, those additional sources would all show. And then what you could do from the data source settings is you can change the source, or you can edit your permissions, or clear your permissions. So those are some of the different options in the data source settings. So if you close that, that will close out the data source settings. Now you can also manage your parameters. We did do a video on parameters in Power Query, but you can edit your parameters, you can manage your parameters, or you can even create a new parameter. And basically parameters, they do have a couple of parameters set up in this AdventureWorks file. Is you name your parameter, then you set the type of parameter that you want to use. You can have a date time, a duration parameter, a text parameter, true, false. So those are some of the different parameter options. And we're going to be doing more videos on parameters because they allow you to set up different types of what-if scenarios, and then you can test out your queries on the different parameters. So we're going to close out of the parameters. You can also set up your properties and your query properties. This is basically the name of your query. And then you may want to set up a description. So if somebody else is going to be using this file, by setting up a description, this says it's the date is the name of the query, and then it filters the sales table using the sales order date. And then these are a couple of options. You can enable the load to report, or you can include in the report refresh. So sometimes including or not including data in your report refreshes can either speed up your data refresh or slow it down, depending on how big your file is and where it's connecting to the data. So those are your query properties. Another thing that you're going to want to take a look at in the Power Query Editor is the Advanced Editor. Now, the Advanced Editor, this is where, again, all of your different steps in your Power Query are going to be shown. And the key thing is with the Advanced Editor is that it always starts with a let statement, and then it ends with an in statement. And then that last statement has that hashtag change type. So that's the last statement. And then you'll notice some of the things are color coded. You have your blue and you have your red, you'll notice a lot. But these are the different columns you have. And then you'll notice that your columns are going to be in quotes because those are text columns. And your Advanced Editor gives you lots of different options. You can either write your M code directly in the Advanced Editor, or you can do all of the steps in your Power Query on the right pane, and it'll automatically put those into the Power Query Editor. So that is your Advanced Editor function inside the home menu. So the other thing you're going to want to take a look at is the transform section of the Power Query editor. And depending on what type of data you have, you can use some of the statistic functions, you can split your columns, you can merge columns, and you can also extract data out of your current data and change the data types. Now, the add column is what adds more data columns to your current source of data. So that's where you may want to pull an index column. You may want to do a conditional column. This is where you can invoke custom functions, and you can also set up your custom columns. So that is based on the different functions of your data. Now, the tools section, this is where you can do your diagnostics on your different columns. And then for another look at it is you'll want to take a look at your view section. This is where you can show your formula bar. If you uncheck that, the formula bar goes away. If you check that, the formula bar reappears. You can also get to the advanced editor from your view. And then also added in 2023 is your query dependencies. So if you select this, you can see your query dependencies, how those queries are based. And if you make this bigger, you can see that the sales query is based on the SQL query. And then you can take a look at your different fact tables and your lookup tables on your query dependencies. So to make that smaller, you can zoom in, and you can make that bigger by zooming out of your query dependencies. So that is a look at the Power Query ribbon and some of the different view menus. This big area in the middle is called your center section. Now, right now we do have that error, but if the data was actually showing, that is where you would take a look at the data part of your Power Query editor. Now, one of the things that you're going to want to do if you make any changes to your Power Query, any of your tables or any query changes, you're going to want to close and apply. So you either get close and apply, you can apply those changes, or you can close. So we didn't make any changes, so we are going to close this query. And what that will do is close the query menu and bring you back to your report view inside your file. So the Power Query changes, really the ribbon did not change much in 2023. They made a few changes in 2022 to the Power Query ribbon. It is similar to the Power Query ribbon in Excel if you're familiar with the Power Query ribbon. And that is a look at the Power Query ribbon 2024. Again, the main functions you're going to want to use is the advanced editor. You're also going to want to change your data sources, but to get to that Power Query ribbon, you're going to want to select the transform data, and that will open up the Power Query ribbon so that you can start making your transformations. That is a look at the Power Query ribbon 2024 in Power BI Desktop.